All right, hello and welcome to WEA Day, Tech Session 1. This tech session is all about using artificial intelligence in, innovating around legacy processes and workflows. And I think the main topic is really whether it's time to trust AI, as we call it, with the important decisions. What does that mean, and so on. So let's see where the topic of conversation takes us. So I'm Atish, co-founder and Chief Technology Officer here at WEA. With me, I have my co-founder and our CEO, Romain. And perhaps most importantly, we have our guest for today. We're going to refer to him as Alex. So I think Romain and I are fairly well known from introducing ourselves through several of these sessions. So instead, Alex, would you like to provide a bit of a brief introduction to yourself and say whatever you'd like?
So firstly, thanks very much for having me. It's quite a really exciting topic, so looking forward to sharing my knowledge and experiences in this topic. I have extensive experience in creation of innovative and advanced technologies, and most of those where they were at the forefront of launching of AI and machine learning based capabilities, and they varied from small ones to national scale ones. So I have a deep passion to technology, so I'm really looking forward, and thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. No problem. So I think we could kick off by asking what does, it's a very broad question, so bear with, but what does it look like when we talk about trusting AI with the important decisions? And I suppose what magnitude can we say those important decisions hold, and at what point does AI play a process? At what point have you seen maybe it's better to be a little more cautious, a little bit more accountable, have a little bit more of a human element in there? So feel free to sort of kick us off, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so firstly, I from my personal experiences, I always look at AI, artificial intelligence, and one part of it is machine learning, as a tool. This is in a broader perspective is similar you having a computer or a PC. So when it comes into the trust element that you mentioned, we work with tools. You work, a painter will work with a brush. We've been working with computers. AI is just another set of tools that you'll be able to work with. In terms of the trust element, like any other tool, you will want to, depending on the context, you will want to apply it with the right in the right way. You want to apply certain measures and way to monitor how you apply it. You want to educate whoever is going to apply and use that tool. Very broadly, I think, unlike the situation we were about 10, 15 years ago, there are a lot of people who already have been using AI for some time now. So in terms of the principles of usage, there are many different frameworks that people apply. A very famous one that is used by in our government website is the FAST, which is the Fairness, Accountability, Sustainability and Transparency. So it's not a new concept, so it's well researched, well applied. But I think that will be one of the frameworks that I do. But I think principally I'll be looking at it as a tool and apply similar principles like any tools that human people, any person uses.
Okay, that's interesting. And I think certainly when you and I have worked together in the past on some, let's say, more sensitive accounts, we found that there's often either expectation that what we're implementing will replace wholesale what human beings are used to do, particularly when you're looking at critical systems or systems that have the, let's say, capability to really have a quite drastic impact on someone's lives or people's lives. So I suppose whether that's sort of in healthcare or I suppose law enforcement or whatever it is, the potential for things to go wrong is also considerable. So what are some of the ways you've thought about to mitigate some of those effects, perhaps maybe in initial prototypes or proof of concepts, and then moving on to productionized systems?
So moving slowly is definitely an approach of doing it. I've seen other organizations where they were brave enough to just move very fast, very quickly, and there is a very big pain in the upfront bit, but then after that big pain, because they moved at a faster rate, that big pain will just regulate itself afterwards. And the reason I say that is as you mentioned, or there is a different approach which you move a little bit more slowly and you bring everyone with you in the journey. During prototypes, assessing what happens in the prototypes, and then building on that as you enhance and improve the AI engine, so to speak. Or I think there are different methods and ways of doing that. Other than the pace that you move at, there is an educational piece, and that education piece is it isn't just for at one specific level in an organization, but it would cover the full ecosystem that goes all the way from the leadership, all the way to the customers, all the way to the people who will be working alongside the AI. And then what it will be used for. So transparency is really important. What would that specific AI engine be used for? What role it will fulfill? What role it will not fulfill? And at this point, and again, I go back into the tools analogy that I mentioned earlier. It is really up to you to decide what tool and what role for that AI engine will be used for. In the examples that you gave in there, it was mostly, and in many other examples, it's there really as a tool to augment and empower existing capabilities and make it faster, as opposed to this is going to replace all existing processes and altogether. So if you go back into the human nature in general, history tells you that just generally human just wanted to create and innovate to make things more convenient, more faster, quicker, and reduce the labor effort that you want to do. That's just human nature in general in life. That's why we you drive and you take the plane and you fly, and instead of walking all the time, you take the train. So within that specific context, AI is no different. Really, AI there is to empower, augment, as opposed to take over. So I think that at the heart of it conceptually is really important to manage and mitigate that fear. Now, there are other things that you will want to do before you apply AI, and these things vary from. So I personally call them the probably 5 or 6 steps. Some people will have them 3 or 4 steps. One of them is that you want to establish the business driver and evaluate the options that you've got. So what is it that you're actually trying to achieve from a business side? And then secondly, you will want to identify your data and data sources and an analysis. Then the third one, you will want to define an initial implementation plan. This is where you refer to as early as a prototype. Then you will want to mature and evaluate that over time before you move into the last step, which is you sustain it and you optimize it. I think with that approach, whether you do it at a small pace or larger or quicker pace, depending on what it is that you're trying to do, is a good way that you cover most bases in my own experiences to mitigate some of those. Now, I think in my experience, in most cases, it will come into the 80-20 rule. You won't have everyone happy with it at the beginning, but slowly people will just adapt, like many other tools that have been used in the industry.
Can I get a follow-up here, trying to combine a bit of the things you mentioned, because I really like your analogy about the tool. I think it totally makes sense. I get it. And I understand this process with those steps that you mentioned to also, this is also part of the education piece, right? That you want to create an understanding and be transparent on the different steps to convince, I like the slow approach, etc. Now, if I bring it back to WIA, so at WIA, we use data and we use natural language processing to extract data for the same business objective you mentioned, going faster, being more efficient, etc. So there is a business drive. Our users and our clients, they see it. They have the same objective. We identify the data. We have a clear implementation plan. And yet, there are still clients and users who come back to us and basically say, I'm going to paraphrase, but they basically say, I don't trust the results. How can you tell me? You've been transparent, you explained to me, but at the end, I see the result, but how can I be sure that what you delivered to me through your AI, your NLP, your software is giving me the same result that the way I would do, with my status quo earlier method? Because in a way, you say like all those tools, very often when you adopt one, you can still compare with your sort of a baseline. You take a GPS, that from A to B takes you 5 minutes, and then the GPS gives you an optimized route, and it tells you 4 minutes 30. And then you go through that route, you're like, wow, 4 minutes 30, I've gained 30 seconds. But in more complex system with data, I'm telling you the sort of a bottleneck and the pushback we get. Is it something you've seen in your experience of implementing those systems, and how do you go about it?
Interestingly, if interestingly is the right phrase here, I think that specific example, I personally have worked with natural language processing since 2007 and before that in university. So it's really close to my heart. So I'm glad you used that as an example. So firstly, definitely the starting point for me for the example that you mentioned specifically, replace again framework isn't probably the first step that I would use. Again, we are augmenting and innovating a more accurate process to improve existing customers' jobs and increase their productivity and optimize their output. Specifically, when we talk about, for example, requests for proposals and the bid tenders, etc., where AI and natural language processing can come in based on a lot of data or small set of data, and I'll come to that shortly as a challenge. You will want AI to help you. And what do you normally do? You want to understand what the question is, proposal. Yeah. You want to look for similar answers that you've previously used or you haven't used, and what are the good ones and the bad ones, and you learn from them. And then you will want to also make sure that whatever answers you use are up to date from knowledge, not really knowledge that is 5-6 years ago. So there are so many simple tasks and repetitive rules in there, and that are well controlled and clear and defined based on data that you have in your closed system or trusted open sources that can automatically extract that intelligence and pre-populate that. And as a good starting point would be, I don't really see it as a binary. Do you use the area capability or do you not? That I don't see that as a good starting point. You may well decide to use the capability to inform and to play one specific part and as part of the operation. So for example, in the example that you just mentioned earlier, some people might say, how do I entrust it? I probably don't even have enough data. So you can use it as part of a bigger process that will fulfill some part of it. And that might be start with a small part or half a part or 3/4 of it or all of it, depending on the organization's circumstances and available data and the maturity of what they've kept throughout the years from a bid proposal perspective and responses. Then you will want to, for those who will have early adoption, that'll be an easier task because you will have a lot more time to optimize your brain that you will create. And for any small data sources that you don't have, or if you don't have access to bigger data sources, you can have access to external mature, trusted data sources. So your AI engine in that example may not provide the full answer, as I mentioned earlier. You don't need to eliminate the human input entirely from the process unless you're really comfortable to do so. So you can start by using it and not having to write everything from scratch. I respond to bids myself, and I wish that I had something that I spend 3 days doing things where, we created a manual library in our company, and that manual library has a big list of questions, and I just wish that someone could spend, for the 5 bids that I responded to throughout this year, for example, I spent weeks doing it. I wish that's something that could be able to do it in a few minutes. And then I can focus. This is not to say I will be replaced, but I can focus my effort into the final bits and optimization, refining that process, and then also at the same time you can feed that back into the brain engine. So next time it will just learn the more bids that you write and the more refinement you do.
Yeah, interesting. No, I see what you mean. I understand. We have often those talks about like a black box, and you mentioned as well earlier, being clear on what the system is provided, and it's not a binary. You had nothing and now you're going to get everything. I like your idea of, I'm reformulating with my word just to make sure I got it, but like disaggregating by steps to make sure that there's a subset of data and there's a subtask that can be optimized, and you measure that. And then the rest is still processed by people, by humans, etc. But making sure that the micro steps, all those steps, there's clearly like a start point and an end point, and you show the improvement there. So I'll take that as a good takeaway. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think interestingly, some of our biggest cheerleaders for some of the client development partners we have at the moment are those people on the ground, actually, Alex. So people who spend day in, day out, saying not really their specialism, not particularly using the apex they're sort of what they could be using in terms of brain power, but it is sort of manually copying and pasting and creating manual sort of project references and then finding sort of I'm thinking of this right now in technological terms, but I'm a slightly different use case, I think. So they're tracing this information from one repository, or we can say documents, multiple documents held in one repository to another, and it's a very time-consuming task. And certainly, we're not the only people in this field, but there's a lot there, I think.
Not just time-consuming from my own experiences. It's also at times irritating. It isn't a great task. I have to mentally prepare myself to go through plenty and hundreds of documents of responses, and no matter how much effort we put into that, I think that element of using AI is inevitable. I think for me, I'll give you just another quick example. If you think about optical character recognitions, OCRs, I remember trying using it when I was in university, early 2000, and it was a very difficult task, and it was very irritating not having to have an AI power to do that. Now, for those who have early adoption of optical character recognition and optimized it and worked with it, nowadays you can find it in the phone. It's a very simple thing on your phone. It just does it automatically. You don't have to think about it. So I would say within the use case that you specifically mentioned, to wait for other players or other industry partners to do it before you as an organization do it may not really be a good strategy. It might be the actual opposite. Actually, you might want to anticipate what AI can do to your specific exam problem here, the one that we're discussing, and how can we embed and use that to integrate with existing processes by introducing these new technologies that are AI based ambitiously and strategically into the organization, so that we learn with it as part of it. So early adoption, I think, as opposed to just sitting back passively waiting for it to overtake the traditional method, and then by that time you would have missed the boat a little bit into being ahead of the curve. And within that specific instance, and depending on the organization, of course, if you are an early adopter, then the cost for you to, not just the cost and the quality of the bid responses that you'll be doing in the next couple of years, 3 years, compared with your competitions, will be a lot more lower cost and a lot more higher quality. So effectively, you will, then your resources and your people in your organization can focus more on the more difficult bit, which is that refining element, that being smart and being unique in the responses that they will send to the as part of the competition, as part of the tender.
Very good. I will ask Romain what our time is looking like.
If I look it from the point of view of how interesting the discussion is, the time is looking bad. The time is looking bad because I feel like we have just starting to explore the excitement, and we are about to be in 20 minutes. So yes, we have to wrap this up, unfortunately, already.
All right, so maybe I'll end with one last question to Alex. So I suppose, and I don't want to put words into your mouth here, but is what you're saying to some of these organizations that might have relied on traditional frameworks and very established workflows for a prolonged period of time, would your advice to them be sort of get stuck in now, learn to work with the technology, even at a sort of rudimentary phase, and that will develop over time with is it effort, money, resources, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in no position to advise anyone, but my experiences and my suggestions always they are, and if I were to advise them, I'd say early adoption to innovate and augment the current frameworks that you have is really advised. The solutions will only improve if applied correctly within that framework. I think they will only improve the overall productivity and framework and the morale of your team. There might be small little hiccups at the beginning, but these always happen. I remember the first time I had to migrate from Windows XP to Windows 7. I found it quite painful, but then afterwards I thought, oh, it's a lot more easier. As soon as I started getting used to that, I'm glad now I did that kind of migration. So that would be my recommendation, advice. But again, I'm not in a position to advise, but if I were to, that would be my message, yes.
I like that you mentioned, sorry, I just want to add that because, I mean, we haven't touched upon that. I like that you mentioned the word morale. You know, we talked a lot about efficiency, and I was like grilling you on measurable and KPIs and data, but the morale is also very important. It's true, because if staff and users have a situation that brings a lot of frustration, even if there's a sort of, as you said, a peak at the early adoption of pain to change a process, if we can show that the morale is going to be boosted, because one thing that was very tedious and painful, laborious to do, then is the ease of doing that through the new tool. Again, going back to your tool, if we can boost the morale, then I think it can boost the adoption as well. So I want to keep that as well as a takeaway, the showing the morale and the clear impact on like just happiness at work, happiness in the activities we do.
Yeah, I agree. And then lastly, if I may, I'd say computers existed for a good number of years. They didn't replace humans. Spam filters existed. They didn't replace humans. Computer games exist. Image recognition, OCRs, all these are tools. They're not really there to replace humans, nor would this. So I'll always look at it as a positive. All of these examples, the one that I mentioned, there have been similar fears in the past, and we still do different types of jobs.
Yeah.
All right, lovely. Well, I think we'll finish on that very optimistic note. Thank you again, Alex, for your time. It's hugely appreciated. And Thank you for the people who've tuned in for this session. If you do have any questions for Alex or for either Romain, myself, or for more than one of us, please do feel free to enter your questions in the sort of allocated area, and we will either pass them on or do our best to answer them in the days and week ahead. Thanks again, Alex, very much. Thanks, Romain, for joining us.
Thank you.
That's it for this session. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Fascinating topics. Cheers.